This is the second part of Class 12 Commerce Chapter 2 Capital Fixed and Working. So, today's discussion is on financial planning. So, financial planning is the process where we estimate how much capital is required in an organization, from where we are going to get the funds, or we have to choose the appropriate source of fund and decide that where are we going to utilize this fund or how we are going to utilize this funds efficiently. Coming to its features, the first feature is it involves decision of financial activities. That means where we are going to invest this money, how we are going to get this money, why are we going to invest this money. All these things has to be uh, uh, thought in detail before making the expenditure or before making the investment. Second point is it is future oriented. Now see, every planning is future oriented because we are making an assumption beforehand before we are getting to see the actual result. So and also it takes some time to see the actual result. So it is actually future oriented and also it is based on forecasting. The third point is it involves deciding objectives, plans, and procedures to utilize the funds. So, this point we are going to discuss later on. Fourth point is estimating division of funds. Now, you have collected the funds or you have raised the funds. Now, we have to decide, or the business has to decide, how to invest this fund, how much is going to be invested in fixed assets, how much is to be kept aside for working capital, how much is to be kept aside for reserves. So this all things has to be decided at first. Fifth point is selecting sources of fund. Now there are various alternatives available in the market from which you can raise your funds. So we need, or the business need to select the best source of fund. Now let us discuss about the importance of financial planning. The first point is helps to avoid the problem of shortage and surplus of fund. Now as we know that we are already making an estimation uh, before the actual events are taking place. So we are also assuming or estimating that what are the current capital requirements of the business and what is going to be the future capital requirement of the business. So while estimating and making all those uh, calculations, we can find out that whether the fund which we are collecting is uh, going to be more for the business or it's going to be less for the business. Second point is helps in maintaining a balance between debt and equity funds. Now, a business organization has to decide that what type of capital it is going to raise, whether it is more of equity or more of debt, and it has to learn to keep a balance between those two to run its business efficiently, and also it has to keep its shareholders happy by giving them maximum returns. Third point is proper utilization of funds. Now, financial planning is telling us not to waste any resources. Rather, we have to utilize those resources in the best possible way. We have to prioritize. We have to prioritize those sectors where we have to make investment first and then select the others according to their priority list. The fourth point is provides policies and procedures for coordinating different departments. Now, see, a business organization has various departments working simultaneously. So, this financial planning is actually providing different policies and procedures for getting all those departments or functional areas together to coordinate and work efficiently. Fifth point is enables effective control over the financial activities of an enterprise. Now, the financial planning is actually or the financial planning is giving the management and to exercise effective control over the financial activities of the business. It is also giving the management um, mm, a plus point that it can check the actual utilization of fund with that of the plant utilization, and it can also find out that what are the causes of deviation, where the deviation has been made, why the deviation is there, or any certain change, any sort of changes which has to be brought into the organization, they can do so. And the last point is prepare the company for facing business shocks in future. Now, when we are estimating the things in the uh, for sorry in estimating the things beforehand, and the actual incidences are going to occur in the future, in that cases obviously we might be thinking about some negative aspects or some uh, conditions which might arise in the business, some risk factors which might arise in the business, for which the business has to keep a uh, reserve or special capital in separately, so that it can overcome certain that type of shocks and surprises in the future. Next, let's talk about the factors influencing business financial planning. So the first point is objective. So the basic objective of financial planning is actually every business wants to acquire business funds at the lowest cost and then make the best possible utilization of those funds. Second one is the nature of the industry. Obviously, if your industry is a capital intensive one, that means you need better technologies, proper machineries, new machineries. So in that case, you will require more amount of financial help. uh, Also, if your company is expanding and growing, it is facing tough competitions, it is investing in research and development, in that case is also more amount of finance will be required. The third point is size of the firm. Now if your firm is a large, if you have a large business or large enterprise, so you will require more amount of financial planning than a small enterprise. Fourth point is capital market conditions. Now, see, financial planning also depends on the cost of the alternative sources of finance, and also the attitude of the banks and financial institution towards your business. Now, there are various alternative sources of fund available in the market. You have to find out the which sources of funds are available in the market, what are the pros and cons of each source of fund, according to which you can make your best choice. The fifth point is government regulations. Now, see, there are various financial policies and regulation provided by the government, implemented by the government, which is also affecting the availability and the cost of the fund. Now, if the, for example, if I say the bank has reduced the interest rates, so obviously your this cost of fund will reduce. So this will also give you a boost to uh, apply for more amount of funds or borrow more amount of funds. The sixth point is degree of risk. Now it depends upon the firm as to what amount of risk it is, or what degree of up till what degree of risk it is going to assume, it is going to bear. So the more amount of risk the firm is going to take, so it can go for depth depth fund, or it can uh, borrow more amount of fund from the public or financial institutions. On the other hand, if the firm enterprise is willing to take less risk or little risk, so it will issue more amount of shares. Now let's discuss about the capital structure. So what is capital structure? It is actually the composition of the long term funds. So long term funds can be of two types. Either we can obtain this long term funds from owners or borrowers, or from both. So ownership funds consist of two things, that is share capital and retained earnings. On the other hand, borrowed funds consist of debentures and long term loans. So let us see the definition given over here, that is according to C.W. Gerstenberg. Capital structure means the type of securities to be issued and the proportionate amounts that make up the capitalization. So long term funds are equity and debt. So here we'll discuss another term, that is capital gearing or financial leverage. That is, the ratio between equity and debt is known as capital gearing or financial leverage. Now when the debt proportion is higher than equity, that means my debt is more than the equity, it is known as high gearing or trading on thin equity. When the proportion of equity is more than the debt, it is known as low gearing or trading on thick equity. Now let us discuss about the factors affecting capital structure. The first point is trading on equity. Now trading on equity means when the company is investing on or using borrowed funds along with the equity capital. So that is known as trading on equity. Or we can say that it is the proportionate of depth in the overall capital. Actually, what we are going to see is that the increase in profit is more or not to the equity shareholders due to the presence of this depth in the capital structure of the organization. Now see, in case of financial leverage, there are two implications. That is, when we are using this debt or borrowed funds, we have to pay a fixed charge. So in that case, if our profit is not more, we cannot pay the equity shareholders properly, or the equity shareholders will be paid a low amount of return on investment. On the other hand, there is another risk, that in case the firm is running in loss, so the firm it is bound the firm is bound to pay the interest as well as the principal amount to this debenture holders or the loan givers. So it is actually building a high degree of risk for the firm. The second point is exercise of control. Now, exercise of control means that the equity, in case of equity shareholders and debenture holders, the equity shareholders have voting rights in the company. Now, if the company is not willing to give its control to other persons, so it will issue less of equity shares and it will opt for debentures or preference shares. The third point is need of flexibility. Now, need of flexibility, that means the business will decide how much flexibility it requires. So if the company is thinking to pay off its debentures and they do not want to give their ownership to other people, so it will opt for debentures and preference shares. Now if the uh, in case of the equity shareholders, once they purchase the equity shares, they they cannot be paid back, and those shares cannot be purchased if the shareholder is not willing to give up those shares to the company. So and also that this debentures and preference shares cannot be issued in the initial stages of the business, because that becomes there comes the burden of payment for the company. Next point is nature of business. Nature of business, that means if the company is having a regular earning and a liberal earning, so it can go for a higher capital gearing. That means more of debt than equity. And on the other hand, if it is having fluctuations in demands and the earning is also not liberal or regular, so it can go for a this equity, the low capital gearing. That means more of equity, less of debt. Next comes the cost of financing. So the cost of financing means the what is the cost of capital that we are planning to raise. So the cost of capital, how you're going to decide the cost of capital, that means what is the rate of interest, the return expected by the investors, the expenses, and all included in issuing shares and debentures. So all these things will determine the cost of finance which you are going to raise, and you have to make the uh, best alternative, you have to find the best alternative source to raise your finance. Next comes period and purpose of financing. Now, if your fund is required for permanent investment, so equity shares is the best choice. And if you think that you need a medium term finance, or um, you need finance for modernization and expansion purpose, in that cases you can go for debentures and preference shares. Next point is capital market conditions. That is the state of the market. Capital market will also influence the choice of your securities or choice of your um, this altered source of funds. So in during the time when the business is having a good market, or is having a good time, so in that cases the investors will take more risk and invest in equity, will like to invest in equity shares. But when the market condition is not good, the investors will play safe and they will invest in debentures and preference shares. Why? Because they know that even when the if the market is running low and the business is going to run through losses, it has to has to bear this um, principal amount of debentures along with the interest. So this is the last part of this discussion. Thank you.